Paul reprimand the women in the church and said, let your, in reference to God is not the author of confusion, but peace, as in all the churches. Let your women keep silent in the churches, for it's not permitted unto them to speak, but to be under obedience, as also saith the law. And if they want to know anything, to ask their husband at home, the Apostle Paul says it's shame for women to speak in the church. That wasn't a conversation. It was the Apostle Paul putting the church in order.
So women shouldn't speak?
They should not be preachers and bishops and elders and pastors in the church. It wasn't done in the scriptures. It isn't done now. Now it has become a political statement. And they feel as though if you preach against it, you're suppressing the women. No, women can play any role in the function of the church that don't violate the scriptures.
So where did this come from? Deaconess, women deacons. Who told you?
Who told you?
Sister? From the book that you'll be a deacon. I don't care what your pastor said.
That's right.
Where did God tell you?
Where did God say?
In this video, I want to cover how biblical verses can be used in order to justify domestic violence. I've seen it myself firsthand when I visited a Seventh-day Adventist church in Birmingham, and Camp Hill Church it was called. And I remembered meeting this meek and mild black woman, you know, soft, tender spoken, etc. And her husband was being brutal towards her in the church. But the Christians had nothing to say about it, because as long as he kept the Sabbath, that's all they cared about. As long as he kept the Sabbath, he was holy. You can beat up your wife, you can abuse her, because they use the Bible out of context. Husband, submit yourself to your wife, which means that it doesn't matter whether you abuse her, it doesn't matter what you do, pray your way out of it, pay your tithes, as some pastors says, pray harder, pay your tithes, and he will stop beating you. In other words, they don't care. I hope you can hear me with the wind. They don't care, you know. And me at the time, being a troublemaker, I offered the guy out. I says, look, come and hit a real man. Come, let's go outside and fight. You know, I was wild in those days. I says, come and fight. You know, and the church, you know, called the police. But, you know, because it's a church matter, you know, the police says, you know, go back next week. But I wasn't a Seventh-day Adventist member. I was just visiting because I had a friend who was a Seventh-day Adventist. So, obviously, I was, you know, curious about the Seventh-day Adventist religion. And all I saw was, you know, misogyny, men using the Bible in order to justify subduing their wives. The church is packed with narcissistic, misogynist men who hate women, and they use the Bible as a weapon, quoting the verses out of context. They don't. I know one guy who was cheated. I think his name was Gary, come his surname, and he was cheating. He got married 5 times, even though the Bible says you should only get married once unless your wife dies. He got married 5 times, but it was okay because he was heterosexual and he kept the Sabbath. And then this is how they make things up. But the church, it attracts a lot of misogynist men. It attracts men who have a problem with women. And they use the Bible verses out of context in order to justify domestic violence towards women. They use the Bible out of context to justify domestic violence towards women. And there are women right now in relationships, you know, in violent relationships, because they're waiting on God to change his heart, waiting on God to play on his conscience. and the pastors are quiet about it. Pay your tithes and God will bless you. Pay your tithes and God will work on his heart and he will change. Pay your tithes and everything is sorted. Everything is solved. Pay your tithes. Everything's pay your tithes. In other words, they don't care. But when I was a Christian, I'm not going to mention the book because I'm no longer a Christian. But, as you know, I lost, my faith when I had cancer, etc. But do you know that I wrote a book which I devoted a whole chapter, on domestic violence, and how the church, the churches, which are male chauvinist, have allowed women to be in abusive relationships, thinking that they're serving God better because he's giving you the grace, to put up with abuse. God's giving you the grace to be beaten up. Probably, a church husband who's inside the closet. That has to be in my next video. A lot of them behind the closet, and the only way that they can express their violence, towards their inner sexual urges is to beat up their wives. It wouldn't surprise me, the kind of men that are attracted towards Christianity, they never seem to be wholesome. There's always something wrong with them. And the poor wife, is praying her way through the violence, praying her way through black eyes, and the church is quiet because you keep the Sabbath, or you attend service on a Sunday. Pray your way through grace and atonement. Pay your tithes, and God will give you the grace to put up with a battered, syndrome. You must put up with the abuse. If that's God's love, I'd rather worship the devil. I'm being brutally honest. If that is God's love, that you could get black and blue, battered, and you call it love, it's no different to the world when they justify domestic violence. It's no different. And the church is just a breeding ground for misogynistic men.
If you don't think, they will think for you. If you don't cry for peace, they will come for you. They'll love you today, they'll love you confused. If you don't cry for justice, they will come for you. Can you cry that you can't see the pain? Don't question why they've got your mind in a maze.